Good morning, guys. I am so fired up. I went on a run this morning, and if you are here live, I would love to see your comments. I would love to see who's here, where you're at, all the things. And I know that this week is a little earlier than we've done it. That's because I've got to go watch a little ballerina in about 45 minutes. So, but I went on a run this morning, really pondering this topic today of 3D identifiers. And I know that in the last probably 2 months, I've posted 2 or 3 times in my regular social media feed about this awareness that I'm having around identifiers that I have. Hey, Jacqueline, that I've seen in my life. And it's so interesting because I posted about them, I see it, but it really wasn't until I decided to do this class after talking to that older lady that I posted about at the swimming pool on Tuesday or Wednesday. And this morning during my run, when I was thinking about that and thinking about teaching the process of how to identify those things, that it came together on something I had learned back in March that I've been just stewing and letting it roll around in my brain. So honestly, that right there is something I wanted to share with all of you, is that if you need time, not if, in fact, integration of new ideas, definitely give grace, hey Violet, for time. It might need, if you learn a new idea and it's hard for you to comprehend, it maybe pokes a few sores or wounds you have, like if you need some time to just let it bounce around, just contemplate it, just let it be for a minute. If that is what you need to do on some concepts as you are expanding and growing and becoming a different person, do it. There's like, don't judge that. I've met a lot of people that they judge themselves really harshly if they're like, I learned that, but I just can't do it. It never sinks in. Anybody done that? Like, you've learned a concept over and over and over. You've heard it before. You've read that book again. And you're like, Now there is process to integration. And I do teach that in my advanced solid ground client, the mastermind that I have. We go deeper into a lot of brain systems, but today that's not our goal. But just realize, those of you that have been on this journey for a while of growth, if integration needs to take some time, some experiment, please give it that time. And I would love to offer you the opportunity to not judge yourself on it. Every human is a little bit different, and they're going to integrate a little bit differently. The way you do it is right for you, and that's fine. And that leads into our topic today of identifying identifiers that are holding us back. Because any time that, and you guys have heard this, you guys in this space, this collective, you are not new to the idea of get out of your own way. That the things that are happening for you is always because of you. And I want to expand on that today. Okay, if you guys have experiences with this, comments about this, concerns, questions about what I'm talking about, put them in the comments. I want this to make sense to you. I want this to be relevant to you. So hey Brianna, how do we get inspired, you guys? Put it in the comments. Why are you inspired? When someone says, man, I was so inspired, maybe by a person, I was so inspired by this thing. What is it that causes us to be inspired? What does that even mean to you? When you're inspired, what's happening? When you say, I was so inspired, what's happening to you? What happened? When you said, I'm so inspired, she was so inspiring, that music is so inspiring, this is inspiring me. What? What is happening? Thoughts? I know there's a number of people on. Share your thoughts. Open the chat. So while you guys are typing, I can see people typing. Feeling enlightened, feeling connected, feeling light. Ooh, I love that word, light. Love, love, love. This is good. So you connected to that person or the event, right? You felt something relevant, something about you identified with this event, that person, those words that you either long to be true for you, and it's not presently. You believe in possibility. Beautiful. They relate. You guys, this is so good. These are beautiful. So when we're inspired by people or events or words, they relate to us, right? It showing possibilities. Yes, it's beautiful, Heather. When we have created, Karina says, to be inspired by someone, I need a point of connection, something that makes that person relatable. Yes, yes. Are you guys seeing the common vein here? Yes. When we have identified things in our life, like this is how I am in this world, in my 3D space, living among things and objects as a human being, I'm experiencing these certain things that I have either subconsciously or consciously decided to identify. Maybe you've identified as a woman. Maybe you've identified as a Christian. Maybe you've identified as a business owner. Maybe you've identified as a soccer mom. So these identifying titles. Maybe you've identified as overweight. Maybe you've identified as weak. Maybe you've identified as struggling with depression. Maybe you've identified, do you see, like we take on these little identifiers. Okay. And when somebody who we connect with, we relate with, we see a mirror of we think, right? This is our own, we create our own reality here, but we think that they relate to us through different various identifiers that are the same. They may not identify with us on everything, but we've identified something about someone else that's doing something that we admire, we think it's great, and we have identifiers with them. And so if they're doing something that we think is super scary, or they're doing something that like, whoa, or they say something deep and we're just like, what? That came from somebody that I admire or respect or relate to on some level. They've enlightened me to a possibility. They've brought light to me. Because oftentimes if we don't relate with somebody at all, there's no point of identification with them. A lot of times we don't think deeper about what they've said. We rarely are inspired by their words, their actions. We're just like, I'm not often, well, I'm not even going to go there about what I'm not inspired by, but so then knowing that, why would we compare or feel intimidated? Sometimes it starts with an inspiration and then intimidation. In the context of this class, people can also show up with that identifying connection, and they're doing something that seems too far out. It seems way outside of what we think is possible for someone that can identify with something we have. We'll be like, what? She did that? It must be a fluke. how did they do that? If they have this identifying factor that I have identified, and this is your notes, right? That I've identified people like us don't do. The age-old saying of, you hear it in movies sometimes of them being like, it's just not done. That's just not done. We just don't do things that way. And a lot of times that is because they've identified that, well, women with 6 children can't be millionaires because we don't see that often. And if you've identified as a mother of 6 and you don't see anybody that's a millionaire, that's a mother of 6 in your circles, you just subconsciously, a lot, guys, this goes into your belief systems and all this stuff. But for this class, this is very super, like, we're touching on what this could be, right? If you've identified these certain things that you do and are, and this is who I am as a being, and then someone else like challenges the status quo, they challenge that common belief that, if I identify this way, that we don't do that. That's irresponsible. She must be neglecting her children to be able to do that. And this is speaking from personal experience. Being a mom of 5 that's a Christian, I had a lot of identifiers early on with people that I was intimidated by. I had a hard time being inspired by them. And I was more intimidated because the identifiers that I held were like, we don't do that. That's not possible. But when I'm inspired, it's when somebody with some of those same identifying factors comes out and I identify with, they're happy, they're doing service, they're doing the thing. Wait, and they're a millionaire and they're a mom of 5 or 6 or 7. Like, what? We can either choose the intimidation or the inspiration. That's actually a choice that we have. And some people say, oh, I always choose to be inspired. I'm never intimidated. Great. If you believe that, that's wonderful. But a lot of times that's like people's cover up coping way of saying things when they are highly either triggered or intimidated by somebody. Because some people show up with identifiers that might solidify a belief system of ours. Like, yep, that lady is a millionaire and she's a mom, but she only has 1 kid. See brain, see body, see belief system. That's just how it goes. Oh, yeah, remember that girl? She said she was succeeding, but she's not. Like, our brain wants to find evidence that we're doing fine, okay? But when it comes to belief systems, a lot of times we start to identify, this is who I am as a being. That's who they are as a being. And so just be aware. And I would love for you guys to do some journaling on, who do I feel inspired by and why? Like, truly get deep. Why does this person inspire me? Why does that song inspire? Inspiration says there's possibility for me. There's light. There's a road that I could go down. It's hopeful, right? When we're intimidated, it's when we identify and say, but that's not possible for me. That's so out there. Like, this is, who am I intimidated by and why? This will help you to start finding what you've identified is not possible for you and what you think might be possible for you. This is so good. This is you identifying really what you've identified with in your 3D world. I'm going to expand on why I'm calling it that here in just a second. But do the journaling. This is my process. When I'm intimidated by someone, when I'm inspired by someone, I didn't always do this, but now I do. I take the time to note. Like, if I'm watching a really great presentation or a class like this by another coach or just, a podcast, whatever, I have now taken my notes instead of, oh, that's such a good quote. Why did this quote hit me? I go deep on these things. And it's because now it's not just a happy quote, but do I have experience here? Have I identified somewhere in this that I now have experience with? And I will start to go deep so that my subconscious brain can stop stories that I don't do that thing, or this isn't, I go, oh, this is why. And I can just be like, yep, because I identified as that little girl that was always called chubby that is now running 5Ks every summer. Like these different things that I'll write in my notes, like that was the experience I needed to dissolve this kind of identifying factor that runners are a certain type of person. These are belief systems I've had, right? So I'm bringing up certain things that I've done, but do this journaling. Who inspires me and why? Who intimidates me and why? One can be the other very easily depending on what you've identified about yourself. Okay? So when you have questions in your mind or you make statements like, well, I can't do that because, think of your dreams, your dream life. Why can't you have that house with that yard? Why can't you have that specific feeling about your job? Why can't you, whatever it is, relationship with your spouse, how you speak to your children, how you show up in your faith space, like whatever it is, right? I can't do this because, and then what is that? Somewhere in there, you'll find an identifier that you, because I'm too old. You've identified that people of your age don't do stuff like that. You know, right? I can't do that because I don't have spousal support. You've identified that there's a certain way that spousal support should show up. Go explore that, my friend. Find out what you think should be happening and challenge it. Is that always true? Is that always true for other people? Can I question this idea that I think is common or this identifying factor for me? And also ask yourself questions like, do you make statements like, well, she can do that because, and you'll find similar answers. Well, she can do that because what? She was born into a rich family. Do you know that? And is everyone that's born into a rich family that way? She can do that because what? What is it? What are these things that you've said are identifying factors of successful people in your mind? Whatever success is that for you. I'm not talking business, not just whatever. And if you haven't even done the work to find out what success means to you, start there. A successful life looks like what? This is so important for you to have clarity on, because it's been my experience that most people aren't living their dreams. There's this piece of identifying factors that they feel like there's these check boxes they have to meet to somehow be qualified to have these dreams come true. But they also haven't actually clarified for themselves what success looks like for them. And that can change over the years. What does success look like for you in 2018? What did success look like for you in second grade? What did success look like for you when you were 12? What does success look like for you now? And what will it look like in 2 or 3 years? Get clear on that. Sit with your dreams, sit with it. Be like, am I even clear on what I really want? Because if we lack clarity, we will have we will go to retreats we didn't need to go to. We'll spend money on books that aren't really helpful. We will sit in spaces that maybe intimidate us, make us feel small because we didn't have the clarity that we needed to go spend some time in places that made us feel big. It's amazing what lack of clarity truly, it is, I would say, probably one of the top factors for people that are not living their dreams is that they're actually not clear. They're too afraid to even dream big and clearly because that's just not really possible. I shouldn't spend my energy there. It's amazing. So if you don't have clarity on what success means for you, and I would also offer to do that in a holistic way, success in what I leave my kids when I leave this world, success in relationships, success in my health, in how I live in my body through life. What are these different areas that to you would mean that you've lived a meaningful life, a successful life? What is that for you? That your kids will all grow up and make good choices? What are these factors that you've said means I'm succeeding? Because if you don't know, then you start taking what other people identify as success. And if it's not your own, you will have dissonance forever. You will always wonder if what you're doing is right. You'll always wonder if your life is worth living. You just won't rise with the confidence needed for the things that maybe really matter to you. Okay. So clarity is king. We spend many, many weeks on this inside the Elevated Mother experience, getting clear on what you're doing and where you're going and how to stay true to that. So when I want to share an experience when I was being coached by an incredible coach, and I was talking to her about, well, this just isn't happening for me. This feels heavy for me when I do this task, or when I'm showing up in this space, I'm feeling these types of emotions, and I'm, and she goes, Robin, just hold on a minute here. You're totally identifying with your 3D world. And I was like, what does that even mean? This was a couple of years ago, just a couple of years ago. And she would use words like that, the 3D world and the 4D world. And I was like, what does that mean? I didn't grow up around any of this kind of jargon. And so if you have had it in your life for a long time, I find this to be very useful information. She said, you're totally identifying with the 3D world. Don't you know that the 3D world is an illusion? And I was like, what are you talking about? This is not an illusion. I can feel it. What are you talking about? My 3D world. And she's like, Robin, the 3D world is what you see. This is what we are experiencing as far as our human body having its 5 senses. This is your 3D world. But listen, because she said the 3D world is an illusion of what someone else decided was possible. And I was like, what? And she said, the 4D world is, and you can read about some of this in Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, which, by the way, is like almost 100 years old, guys. This idea is not new. The studies on this and these ideas of people like tapping into this kind of understanding is not new. But she said the 4D world is like your imagination. And as a Christian and someone that like thinks about spiritual things, I've often wondered why we have imagination. Why can we like think of things that aren't real? What's the purpose of that? And she said, Robin, the 4D world is that world where you can dream. You think of things that aren't in your 3D reality. You think of things and can conjure up ideas, scenarios, like all sorts of stuff inside your 4D world. She said, our 3D world is just the manifestation in the 3D version of someone else's 4D world until we start creating our own. The idea of glasses, the idea of a water bottle, the idea of a lotion bottle, the idea of Post-it notes was something someone saw as an idea in the 4D world first. And she said, everything's created in the 4D world first. And then whatever force does this, they put out an intention that says, I will create this to be something I can hold in the 3D world to create here as part of my experience here. So we have inventors, we have CEOs, we got entrepreneurs, we got these people that have created cars, roads, credit cards, online banking. We choose. Everyone that's hearing this, you have chosen to take part of someone else's dream. When we buy the hat, when we pick up the glasses, if we didn't create them, right? We say, that will add to my experience. I'm going to take that and that and that and this and that. But she's like, Robin, realize that the 3D, like this is an illusion of like You don't have to identify with any of this. And that just kind of blew my mind. So if your mind is being blown right now, just know that that's an idea, as we talked in the beginning, that may need to just bounce around in your brain for a while. Like what was Robin talking about when she was talking about the 4D and the 3D? But now I'm like, oh, that's what I've been doing. And that's what I've been teaching my clients. We have a specific process for envisioning out like time that has not existed yet and seeing a future version of ourselves, how we're being, how we behave, what we identify with. And that's where I had that connection this morning on my run. I was like, oh, that's what we're doing. When I'm releasing these identifying factors, it's my future self coming into creation. That's integration. That's, oh my gosh, like I was just like, oh my God. I know a lot of people in this space get frustrated when they're like, it's not happening for me, it's not happening for me. There are identifying factors that you have got to release to allow that future version that you've dreamed of. Get clear on that dream, that future version of yourself. What does she think? What does she do? What does she identify? What's beautiful is over time, I have learned to release all identifying factors and be like, I don't want to identify in this 3D space with any limitations. Why can't my future self overcome some of the diseases that I've been diagnosed with? With this future self, she doesn't ever get emotionally involved with like judging herself on how she treats her kids or like, whoa. And just talking to some, people that and this coach that was teaching me this at the time, 2 years ago, she was challenging me because I had a subconscious identifying thing that women and men, people that are extremely obese, like morbidly obese, were not successful. That goes back to a lot of belief systems that I've struggled with body image issues, weight issues. I have serious, and I'm still deconstructing identifying factors of body image. Like what a healthy person looks like, this is a personal thing of mine. But this lady that was teaching me this was like 400 pounds, just a very morbidly obese woman, but she was a millionaire. Just a millionaire. She has 2 kids. Like she's just changing the world. She wrote 2 books. She was wildly successful. And I'm just like, how does a woman that is 400 pounds, she can't even she has to charter her own jets. And I thought, you know what? Just listening to her talk about this, I'm like, she must not identify her weight, her body, how she looks in any way, shape, or form to her success. And then my brain, I wanted it to start finding evidence of this, right? Like I started being like, well, if I've identified with that, I started I have experience in this. I used to identify that somebody that gave a presentation like this had to have makeup on, hair done it, and have great backgrounds with, no kids' toys in the background. And when I stripped that away, so much of success started happening for me. When I just showed up. Because guess what? As you guys all identified, people started relating with me. Oh, she's just a mom. She wears a hat sometimes because she has greasy hair. Oh, her hat and her clothes don't have to, match. She's not super trendy, but she can be successful. She can show up and do this stuff. I can't tell you, there's been a number of people that have commented that just my appearance and how I show up in a regular bedroom in my house has inspired them because they connected on that level of, wait, we're moms. Normal people can inspire. We can share ideas. You don't have to be in a boardroom. What? These are such big ideas. This was a future version of myself that had released these identifying factors, and she's coming right into existence. But you got to identify some of them. And when you start coming up against, why isn't this showing up for me? Look for these identifying factors in your 3D world, right? This is, how am I showing up right now? Because whose dream am I taking up? Who said I had to show up in this way or do this thing? Or I like, what? Because if you can release them by identifying them and saying, you know what, I'm going to experiment. This is the other part of the process. You identify them, experiment letting it go. Ask your brain, 10 people that are overweight be successful. Do a Google search if you need overweight successful people to bring in evidence. Can people that have a past drug addiction be successful? We have evidence of that everywhere. Can somebody that has had a past porn addiction or cheated on their husband or wife be successful? These are things I've heard from clients, from just that they have identified as a factor of why they can't succeed, why good things can't come to them. Well, I've been divorced twice, so I must not be a good wife. I can't have a fulfilling marriage. It's just not. Whoa. Do you see how people set up their limitations? They blocked themselves. This is the meaning of you're in your own way. You have identified that whatever you're identifying in your world, these people don't do that. And that's me. This kind of person doesn't do that. And that's me. This kind of person doesn't do that. And that's me. You're identifying, like in your identity, that that's not what you do. I can't do that. Start experimenting. That's the number one first thing to do. Just experiment, but you got to know what they are, right? I'm going to experiment today on, I'm just not going to wear. I remember one time I went to a lake and I had a certain swimsuit that I loved, but I was self-conscious a little bit. I was one of those that I have body image issues, okay, with like my butt and my thighs. And so I always wore a skirt or shorts. And I'm like, I'm not going to do that today. And it was an experiment for a day. And I said, I'm just dropping that belief today. I'm going to just go out there in this cheeky swimsuit. And I am going to just tell myself that I don't identify with that anymore. I'm just going to go swimming and enjoy it and not worry if somebody thinks my butt isn't pretty enough to be hanging out a little bit. Experiment. And you know what was crazy is I was very conscious of it at first. But once I lived, it's almost like my brain thought I would die if I went out there without shorts. It was that deep of an identifier. Once I went out and was swimming and playing, and I forgot about it. And by the end of the day, when I was changing out of my suit, like in the end, it was an all-day event. And I was like, I never even thought about it again. And in that moment, this is a decision, right? We always have the choice. I said, I will not identify with that anymore. I have a whole day of evidence that this was so joyful, so fun. That is so dumb that I've been worried about what the top of my butt cheek looks like in a cheeky swimsuit. Like, this is so dumb. Holy cow. And by releasing those identifying factors, I found myself even judging other people less. I grew up in a very judgmental space. And so I learned that skill. I have now learned to drop so much of it. It's beautiful. It is a beautiful place to live. And I just want to testify to you that you can drop these identifying factors that have become these limiting beliefs for you. You can drop them. You really can. And it doesn't have to take a long time, but it is a decision to say, I no longer am going to identify with that in this realm. I've seen the 4D. I've seen what I'm capable of. I've seen possibility. I'm no longer going to identify with that. And when I saw that really obese woman so successful, it just crushed that identifier. I'm like, it does not matter how you show up. Holy cow. I wonder how much that's held me back. And you can drop those things. So when you lose the identifiers, you gain access to your dreams. That 4D version of yourself, that life you dream of, those investments you think you're going to make, they will come in faster. You will call it in. That is when people say, I'm calling in this version of myself, this abundance, that is what they're doing. They're dropping these identifying factors. They're calling in that future version of themselves faster and faster and faster. Because it is your choice. It is your choice. This 3D world we live in is just, it's things being created into a reality. But the 4D is where your capacity is. It's where everything is first, always. And a lot of people just sit here in the 3D thinking they're encaged by this or something. Like this is the only option. And I'll tell you something, if you continue to argue for your limitations, you will always keep them. I was just talking to a girl the other day that was telling me, I need more income. And I was like, well, you have this and you live in this area and you do this. Like I was pulling out all these possibilities and she goes, yeah, but I don't want to do that. Well, yeah, but I don't want to actually, do that. And I said, you know what? If you're going to argue for your limitations, you get to keep them. And she was like, and I was like, you're giving me an excuse or a reason for everything that could be a possibility for you. If this is the headspace you live in, you get to keep these limitations that you keep saying you don't want, but you're arguing for them. And she's just like, well, like, are you scared? Are you identified with this so much so that if you drop some of it and actually go for some of these dreams, you're afraid, right? And she's like, well, that's exactly right. Like, I don't want to believe that I could actually do it because that's scary. That was outside. So we've been working on dropping belief systems that support that she can't do that. I can't do that because she can do that because we've had to go and identify a lot of those. And as she's stripping away those identifying factors, her dreams are coming a lot closer and a lot faster. So that is kind of a condensed or a overview of this idea of where those identifiers come from. Questions to ask to find some of them if you're unsure. The necessity of getting clear on what you've seen in the 4D and understanding that what we are participating here is always a choice. And that everything we see is someone else has decided to take the steps to call into reality something they saw in the 4D. What do you see in the 4D that you want to create? I created the elevated mother experience. This did not exist in reality until I created it. I saw this in my 4D world before it is now in part of the 3D world, and it's in homes across the country. Crazy, right? To create something into existence. But I can tell you, the faster you, and I was like, who am I to publish a workbook? I'm not good enough. I had to drop all those things and be like, who am I not to? Like, I'm the one that's thinking all this stuff. I have an obligation to create this. It will never be in reality if I don't do it. Yes, this doesn't contain something that probably hasn't been created like it before, but it's never come from me with my experience, my way of explaining it. And people that relate to me and connect to me, they can thrive in this content delivered in this way. So I promise you, your personal commitment to bringing your dreams into reality is where it's at. But releasing those identifying factors is how you gain access to that. Beautiful, beautiful. That's all I got, guys. Any last comments? Are you guys blown away? Gonna go to ballet now and watch my little ballerina. I hope you guys have an incredible weekend. Let this stuff roll around. You can comment under this anytime and tag me if you have questions. Get into my direct messenger and ask me questions about this. This is awesome stuff. All right.